Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Executive Scrutiny Special Budget Scrutiny meeting. You will have received emails from me about this, so hopefully you've all taken that on board if you've got any detailed, difficult questions that you want to ask. What we'll do is we'll split this, Don, if this is okay, we'll split this down into revenue budget and then capital budget. And what we'll do is we'll go through the different services. If we start with you, Don, on the corporate services, would you like to introduce the revenue budget? Beg your pardon, I've got to do the apologies. Any apologies? We've had two apologies actually. We've had Yvonne Williams and we've had Rob Cooper.
And Councillor Harwood as well.
And Councillor Harwood.
Councillor Shanker.
And Councillor Shanker. And Councillor, sorry, Sandhu. Any more? For any more? Oh, we've got some cabinet members turning up, that's good. There are no late items. Have any declarations of interest? Okay. Don, over to you.
Chair, can you give us a bit of a steer on how you want us to play this? Are you wanting me to just take you through the report?
No, what I think would be good is if you just give us a general overview, because I'm sure that we've got lots of members here that have read every line of every page.
Right, that's fine.
And I want you to stick to your area of corporate resources, because I'm going to invite Andy and Christine to do an overview of their areas as well. Yours should be very short.
Oh, you want me to give you a corporate overview of the whole paper, and then you want me to give you
well, if you
the impact on the budget within corporate resources?
Yes, please.
Okay, right, that's great. Okay, what we've got here then is, this is a third in a series of medium-term financial plan reports that we've brought through the Cabinet process. We started the process off back in July, where we set out a strategy report. We, in that paper, set out what the indicative position was across a four-year medium-term financial plan, 1920 to 22-23. From there, we started working up with the Cabinet savings plans and proposals, working out priorities, and we brought a report back to Cabinet in October with further savings plans, primarily within the people services. There was some other savings within corporate resources, but it was primarily with people services that allowed us to go out to consultation at the end of October, and that consultation is now out there and it's running until the 1st of February. What this report does is bring a further update position where it shows a balanced position for 1920, and that is subject to the delivery of further savings, and those savings are set out at Appendix 3 in the report, and that's where you've got the headlines and the numbers. So pages 33 to 42 will be of interest to this Executive Board. There is, as you outlined, a section on capital within the paper, and the detail behind the capital budget plans are included at Appendix 5 on page 46. What that includes is some schemes that are already in the system that are ongoing, and some new schemes as well. What the report also sets out is that the savings plans, the new savings plans, will have an impact on jobs, and there is a section in the report which flags up that the delivery of the savings, the new savings in this report, will likely have an impact around 42 full-time equivalent posts. So in total, the 1920 budget proposals are likely to impact against 170 full-time equivalent posts. The consultation on this paper has already started. It went through Cabinet on the 12th, and we've started the consultation process on the 13th, the next day, and that will run for 6 weeks into the middle of January. We'll take on board the feedback from that consultation, and we'll bring a final report into the committee cycle during February. There's lots of supporting information set out in the report, but the 5 recommendations that were agreed by Cabinet last week are set out in paragraph 2 of the report. So it's a bit of a summary of what's in the paper, Chair. Are you now looking to the appendix, or how do you want us to play this?
No, what I want to do now is invite members to ask any questions from the corporate resources area. If you've got questions, if we break it down in this way, we can stop flitting backwards and forwards to areas. Have you got any questions? Which, if you're unsure, we have digital and customer management, direct property, legal services, and HR and organisational development. You got any questions in those areas? I think they're the less interested areas, but you might have some questions. Any questions? Councillor Kerr.
Actually, a question of procedure. Are you going to have a separate section of asking questions of a more general nature that would apply for everywhere?
Well,
do you want to pick those up
Don's
again?
done the general discussion on this. If you want to ask a general question, then by all means, this is the section to do it.
Okay. Because, thank you, because there are some elements within here where it's clear that there's a desire to get people more involved, the general public more involved in delivery of services. The strongest one is in parks. And there are also some references where there is talk about, say, selling our services to an other. And I wondered whether this is something which, it doesn't come out into a lot of areas, but is it something that all, I'm not quite sure which level, all heads of departments have been asked to think about?
This is probably a question for the Cabinet members at the back. Have you got any views on Councillor Kerr's question?
Can you just butt in and say, parks are doing this, it's all the other areas which aren't doing it as well?
Can you explain what do you mean parks are doing what?
Parks are positively seeking to engage more with local people, and the paragraph about parks in the document talks about wanting to engage more and getting local people more involved in service delivery, for example, looking after flower beds and getting involved in, you know, potentially bidding for money and things. But it isn't the only area of the council where there are opportunities to either get people involved. For example, you get people more involved in looking after their local environment in terms of being more responsible about litter or about recycling or these things. How are we looking actively at doing more engagement like that? And also, are we doing more actively at looking at where we can sell our services, potentially into the private sector or to other local authorities?
Councillor Poulter, basically I think what she's trying to say is that there are areas of the council activity where we can engage with the general public more. Is there a theme running through that? Is that something that you are trying to encourage, and is it an instruction that's handed down?
Yes.
Have you got any more details?
Chair, yes, parks are very proactive at this sort of thing, but they're proactive in conjunction with neighbourhoods, with the neighbourhood teams a lot of the time. Yes, we absolutely encourage that as local councillors, and we would, as an administration, encourage all councillors to engage in that as well. And in terms of services, offering our services out to other for other things, we do that a lot. For example, with mowing and street cleaning and stuff like that. It is councillor Smales portfolio mainly, but Christine might want to offer some explanation in relation to the types of services that we offer out for sale and stuff like that. But in general point, yes, parks are good at it. Yes, neighbourhoods are good at it when they're directed to do so, and we as an administration would encourage them to do so.
Christine?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that's right. We do encourage, where we can, services to make these opportunities. So, for example, in some of our engineering design services, they've done work for developers as part of Section 278 agreements where they have paid for the council staff to be able to do those services for them. So it is something that we encourage all services to look at. But I think there is something perhaps about having a more strategic approach, and that is something that I think we would look at over the coming year as to whether there is a more strategic approach to being a bit more commercial about how we do things and how we get communities involved. But it is a long-term strategy, especially getting communities involved, because it takes a lot of time and effort to work with them and for them to take up some of the roles that we would like them to work with us on.
Is that okay? Councillor Ashburner.
Where in the report is the discussions about the changeover from cabinet to committee? Where in this report is there a report on the costs associated with changing from cabinet to committee?
That's you, Don. Are there any costs in there?
Chair, if you want my input on that one as well, there are none. It's not a budgetary issue. The introduction of the committee system, the finances are a major consideration in that all-party working group as to what it. But just to remind members that it was the considerations were set off on the principle that the introduction of a committee system would not increase the number of meetings or the costs in relation to administering the council's procedures. So there wouldn't be currently any financial costs subject in this particular report.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have darted about a bit in regards what you specifically asked that we tried not to do. But can I just ask a question for clarification and then one to Don on his opening remarks? Just in terms of the actual report, there's obviously Appendix 2 and Appendix 3. Appendix 2 is in relation to the savings that were in the October Cabinet report, and Appendix 3 is the new savings. Can I just ask, are we taking them together by directorate, or do you want to split the appendices?
No, by directorate, please.
So corporate resources in Appendix 2 and 3 together. Okay, that's fine. So firstly, can I just ask Don a question on his opening remarks? Don, you talked about the fact that there were 170 FTE going to be affected by the proposals in here. Do we yet know how many people that is?
That's a good question that I haven't got the answer to, Chair, but we do have the information. I can feed that back to you.
Okay, we'll have to come back to you on that.
Yeah.
Are you done?
No. Not on the corporate directorate, no, that was just on his own remarks.
Okay, carry on.
Do you want me to go through them all at once? Yes. Okay. In Appendix 2, under Property Services, savings in property management costs as a result of property rationalisation programme is dependent upon the closure of Queen's Leisure Centre. Obviously, there's a savings target in there for the closure of Queen's. Is that contingent upon a new facility being built elsewhere?
Yeah, we'll answer questions one by one.
One by one, okay.
Completely the opposite way you normally do it.
Yep. You never just
Yeah, that's been put in, and it is assuming that we're will close Queen's Leisure Centre at that point. Is it contingent on another one opening? Not at this stage, but it's just assuming that we will close Queen's.
Next.
Digital and customer services, base budget efficiency review. There's a number of things in there: Microsoft spend efficiencies, staffing efficiencies, modernised backup arrangements, contract and licence management. There's obviously potential reduction in FTE there of 1. In terms of the staffing efficiencies, what sort of management level is that FTE, and does that mean that management responsibilities are therefore going to have to be shared in that particular area?
Can you answer that?
Chair, I have to say I'm struggling a bit here. I've got what paper are members reading?
And can you indicate where you're looking at this information?
Yeah, it's in Appendix 2 on page 26. Is it the same in this report?
We've got the public consultation document.
That's why we may be getting confused.
Okay, it's Appendix 2 of the appended report, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
Appendix 2 of Appendix 1. Right. And what pages are on? Can you help me, please?
26, Don.
But it's not 20, yeah.
Of the consultation document, the public consultation document. That's what I'm looking at.
Do you know it? Do you want to take it?
Sorry,
Councillor Russell.
Sorry, Councillor Russell, is it? Oh. So, is the question the staffing efficiencies of 70k on that line? What level is that? It is potentially ahead of service level.
So what paper are you?
Don, and could you switch here? Thank you. Can I just ask members to work from one document, because it's confusing apparently. Which document has most people got? Have they got the Cabinet report? Yeah, can we work? Anybody not got a Cabinet report? Sorry, Councillor Russell, would you like to carry on?
Thank you very much, Chair. I will try and use the report rather than the appendix if it's confusing people. So, at Appendix 3 in Corporate Resources, Property Services, Mileage Efficiencies, a review of the use of employee vehicles for business travel to generate savings in the cost of mileage reimbursement. Can someone explain to me what that actually means? Does that mean a change to how we pay our staff mileage if they're required, or what does it mean?
It means that we're going to review the travel of people, so people take the appropriate vehicles when they're going to business meetings. For instance, people claim mileage at the moment because they're using their own vehicles, but we're going to review that and make sure they use the most appropriate transport to get to the place. So it doesn't mean changing the salaries or anything like that. It's just making sure that they use the appropriate vehicles or transport or rail.
What?
Sorry, Chair. It's the trying to divert the usage of cars to using the council's fleet cars, which are electric, where the costs per mile of running an electric car is significantly cheaper than running a private car and then claiming council mileage.
I understand now. So basically what we're saying is we're trying to encourage council staff to use our electric vehicles rather than their own for business use. Okay, and we anticipate a £70,000 saving on that, do we? It's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's across 2 years, yeah.
Okay.
Just before you carry on, Councillor Russell, Councillor Kerr, I think she wants to put a bid in for bikes.
Just on that point, I spoke to one of our officers who had used one of the e-bikes for going on a visit, and there wasn't a way that he could claim back his £2 or whatever it was for using the e-bike. So we just need to make sure we can do that too.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Russell.
On that same page for property services, more efficient use of consultants and contracts to deliver a percentage saving on spend. Can someone explain what that means as well? How are we going to... Is that more efficient contract management to improve the way that we deal with contracts? Less consultancy use? I don't know.
Chair, just on consultants, given the some of the comments previously, I might have expected to see a bigger saving actually from cutting consultants. So whether is the scope for bigger cuts in consultants, Chair?
That was more of a statement than a question.
Yeah, Chair, this is a 2021 saving, so it's not part of the 1920 budget, but it is in the medium-term financial plan. The detail is still to be worked up. The saving of 250,000 is across those 2 years. Within the property services team, there has been a tendency to use an extensive number of consultants. What we're looking to do is actually bring in more in-house expertise and remove the reliance on consultants. That's where we believe we can make the savings. So as sort of Councillor Rawson came in behind there, I think that is definitely an achievable saving. I think the costs associated with consultants in that particular service has been high, and we believe that in the course of time we can actually reduce that significantly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Over the page, on page 34, property services, efficiencies in the revenue repairs and maintenance budgets, 250k next year. Does that mean fewer repairs to our properties?
Chair, that's just a straight cut on our revenue repairs and maintenance budget. Will have an impact, very definitely will have an impact. The revenue budget is, in a year, £2.5 million, so that's a 10% cut.
I think that's answered your question.
Can I just have an assurance on that basis then that this is a safe level to cut from that budget, based on the fact that there has been many surprises in the past about things happening to our buildings with us not being aware? We don't want to increase the likelihood of that happening again. So is this safe to do?
The budget's been untouched for a number of years. I think that's fair to say. But the budget that we have left, we will be prioritising what the money is available to do. Statutory compliance stuff first and foremost. So health and safety checks, asbestos, that type of stuff.
Okay. Further down the page, review of technology, review of mobile phones and using alternative digital technologies as appropriate. I'm all for moving to digital technologies. Just want to ask about the phones issue. That's not going to mean that our staff who require a mobile phone for work will lose that, will it?
No, but it will mean those who have got phones now and don't need them will no longer have them. We will be significantly reducing the number of mobile phones that we've got out there at the moment.
Can I just ask a question on that? It's slightly related. If we use some app like WhatsApp, where the phone calls are free and the messaging is free, would that save considerable amount of money if we had that process?
I'll check on this, but my view is that we don't pay for calls and we don't pay for texts anyway. With the contract that we've got with such a high user, we've been able to negotiate all that down to zero.
Any more, Councillor Russell? Councillor Eldred, your turn.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come in on that last point before I ask my other questions then. So in terms of the process for reviewing who does or doesn't require a mobile phone, what will that process be?
Process being put in place. I'll have to get back on what it is in terms of detail.
Okay. So now I'm going to get confused because I'm moving around all over the place. 4.25 on page 6, staffing efficiencies associated with the review of emerging technologies. What is that specifically, and what does that equate to in terms of posts, please?
Yeah, it's one post in democratic services.
And what are the emerging technologies? What are we looking at specifically?
They're going to look at doing things differently, so taking minutes differently, and looking at things on the digital agenda that are coming through that'll help them to the team to be able to rationalise it by one person.
In the property 4.39, can you just advise which posts within property services we need to pay a market supplement for, and how long we've been doing that and how long you expect it to continue?
The saving from there is we've already got market supplements in the system within property services at 28% for maybe a dozen posts, and that's been in place for over a year now. And having looked at it with a fresh pair of eyes, we're going to look to review that market supplement, and we'll be stopping some of those market supplements perhaps earlier than originally thought, and that's where we'll get the saving.
But, sorry, it's not a saving identified here, it's a pressure. And again, those 12 posts, what posts are they in property services? Unless I'm reading it wrong, Don.
Yeah, it's the original pressure in property services was 250,000, and we're looking to reduce that down to 100,000. And how we're looking to reduce that pressure, in one of the earlier papers, we'd agreed 250,000, and we brought it down to 100,000. So that, my head was reducing the pressure as a saving, and where we're reducing that pressure is through withdrawing market supplements. Where the posts are within the property and development team, like surveyors and architects, that type of thing.
Lovely. And that, previously we talked about this, can't find it, but the Microsoft efficiency, 350,000. Could you just give us a bit more detail as to what that is specifically? That's quite a big saving.
Sorry, which page is that, please?
Chair, this is when we brought the ICT service back in-house from Serco. There was a cost of doing that was negotiated, which in effect moved the ICT services into a, the contract was with Azure, wasn't it? Anyway, we've moved it into a cloud-based storage space. The original negotiations were at a cost of 650,000. Again, when we've had a look at that with a fresh pair of eyes, we've reopened those negotiations and been able to reduce the costs of that contract significantly by that amount of money.
Last one from me on this, Chair, is so on page 24, coming back to the property rationalisation programme, are we really only, we're undertaking a massive property rationalisation programme, are we only expecting to get a saving from the potential closure of Queen's? Are there no, is that 225,000 is only about closing Queen's? Is there no other savings anticipated in the next 4 years from property rationalisation?
I think we've got a property rationalisation programme in situ now. It's been part of the current medium-term financial plan that we are disposing of buildings wherever we can, downsizing buildings, merging buildings, reviewing rents. This is a separate saving further down the line linked to the overarching strategy of property rationalisation. This is not just the one thing that we're getting out of property rationalisation. There is significant savings coming out of that process in the current medium-term financial plan. That's just an additional one-off.
Okay, are you done? Thank you. Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just based around the saving for the undertaking a full review of the council's single-person discount database. That's quite a page 26 for those watching at home. It's quite a sizable saving, that is, and quite not an insignificant investment to achieve that saving. And I was just wondering whether you can elaborate a little on the intelligence that leads us to believe that we can get that level of saving in 1 year from that, and therefore it warrants that level of investment. Thanks, Don.
Yes, we've got confidence that that is a prudent figure based on track record of what this company that we're looking to procure to support this exercise has been able to deliver in other similar size authorities to Derby. We last did a single person discount review, I'm told, a few years ago, and it generated a modest saving because we did it in-house, and this provider is able to use forensic software that will be able to flag up areas, instances in properties that where the claims are made, which will generate a £500,000 saving. I think just to put this into context, if I can, from memory, we've got in the region of 40,000 houses out there who are claiming single-person discounts. Each of those single-person discounts are qualify for 25%, a quarter of their council tax bill. You don't need that many to get a saving of £500,000. I think it's in the region of 1,000 properties, so we'll be looking to find sort of out of 40,000, we're maybe looking to reduce the numbers by 1,000 through this piece of work.
Just to follow up on that, Don, it sounds a little bit mysterious. It sounds awful like we're... Do we know anything about the actual methods that this company is going to employ? Are they going to be snooping people's Facebook accounts? Are we going to be doorstepping people on a Sunday morning to see if they've got someone in bed? Just to understand is, I understand that the savings there and we don't want people claiming a discount that they haven't got, but we also don't want to victimise people, and we want to make sure that the due diligence is being done, so we're not getting a disreputable company to go out there and basically spy on residents of Derby who actually are paying council tax. So if we could just have a bit more information on that.
Chair, I'm not sure the detail. I think it's they've got access to databases like electoral registration, credit company checks, that type of stuff. Doorstepping, looking for people leaving early in the morning is not something that we would be looking to encourage, I don't think.
Yeah, I think we've seen this before, and I don't think there was a situation where there are teams of people going out watching households, because I mean that would be quite an expensive task to do. I think it's all electronic and database matching.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in on that one? I actually introduced that a few years ago when we actually did it in-house. And what we did is we actually cross-reference with the electoral roll. But obviously, not everybody has to be on the electoral roll. So what we did is we used a company for doing with the credit reference agencies and things like that. So none of the checks were done before. They were never checking whether there was more than one person living at that property at the time. So it was basically catching up on what they should be doing. And I'm surprised that this has not been kept up over the past few years. Really, I mean, I'm surprised it's still coming to this point. We're not checking with the electoral roll. I mean, it's in our own department and stuff. Or like I said, with the credit reference agencies, it's not rocket science to do it, really. So, but this should be an ongoing thing and not just a one-off particular exercise, really.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing to say.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing to say. What we're commissioning here for that 152,000 cost is a 3-year support programme. The savings will get out in the first year, but across the 3 years, the intention is to skill transfer what this company might be able to provide, so that our in-house team can learn from that, so that when they leave, we might be able to deliver best practice that they've been able to do with their forensic tools. That's what we're looking to do. But I will come back with further detail on exactly how they actually get the savings out, Chair.
Thank you very much. Carry on.
Page 27, Don. On the removal of free staff parking, free staff and councillor car parking and implement of charges and permits. A couple of points, really. One, I guess, is what level of uptake are we expecting, and are those savings based upon? How does this fit with people who are required to use their cars for work, and how is that being accounted for? And also, are we imagining a sliding scale for these permits based potentially on the need to use it, or I don't know, even the level of the staff member, or is my permit going to cost as much as yours, Don?
Chair, we're starting the negotiations with the trade unions next month on this, and we've prepared a paper to open up the negotiations with the trade unions. Clearly, it'll be a process that'll be as inclusive as it can be. I think the starting point that we've come up with is that all staff will have to buy a car park pass. The savings are predicated on 20% take-up, and we've worked out that figure linked to existing numbers of users who've got passes. There's about 1,500 passes in the system. What Councillor Stanton is referring to will be part of those negotiations. I'm absolutely sure that very high car users will have a view, social workers, for example, who in old money were using the essential user allowance and need a car for work. I'm sure we will be looking also at lower paid employees, colleagues who have cars as well. The one thing I would say is that it's not just a case of maybe buying permits. We'll also be looking to divert users to use our core wheels electric cars as well, so that we get maybe an impact on green energy and reducing the number of carbon emissions across the city. So it's a bigger thing than a cash incentive. But the negotiations haven't started yet. I think we're starting at one end of a spectrum. What we end up with is probably going to be ideally a negotiated point. We don't want to get into a position where, I think this was tried a few years ago and didn't get over the line. I think there was some very strong feedback. Having said that, I think we're probably one of the very few authorities who actually still have a free car parking permit system for employees across the piece.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Stanton? No. Councillor Khan?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to go on to public health. I think the copy I've got is page 28, reduction in public health grants. What is that?
We're moving on to people's now. Always.
Can we hold that until we go for people's on that one, please?
Okay.
Are we all done on corporate services? Councillor Willoughby?
Yeah, obviously, it's a bit harder when you're part of the controlling group, because we've obviously had lots of discussions with people in our cabinet members and people in our own groups about this sort of outside of it. You know, I've had meetings with the cabinet members and stuff like that. But just one thing that I'm sort of particularly interested in is around where we brought up the things around the sort of uses of alternative technologies. For instance, you know, the one about, you know, the use of use of new backups in the digital services on page 25, and then the other one on in the sort of appendix on sensor cabinet on page 33. No, it's not. It's the one about the mobile phones, page 34, and alternative digital technologies. It's obviously something I'm very interested in, and you talked about the use of the Azure and the Azure cloud. So I'd just be interested. Obviously, I don't necessarily expect it to be answered now, but what sort of alternative technologies we have in mind, how the sort of council proposes to, you know, is using the Azure cloud. And also, you know, how they're going to make those, you know, those general sort of savings through that, and the revised backup process I'd be interested in as well. But I guess officers won't know that, but so I'm happy to just get those answered offline, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you take that up? Yeah, thank you. Are we all done on corporate services? Good. Who wants to go next? Andy.
Thank you, Chair. It just seems logical because Peoples follows corporate resources. Just to set this in context, as Don outlined in his introductory element earlier, that the Cabinet paper dated the 24th of October contained the vast majority of the people services proposed savings, and we're now out to consultation, and we're now in week 5 of the consultation, and I have to say that the response has been very good in terms of a very high number of responses in relation to the vast majority of the proposals that are currently out for consultation, and that they are the proposals summarised in Appendix 2, pages 28 to 31. What I wanted to do by means of introduction really and focus was to just summarise the further savings that we haven't had a chance to have a look at here, which is summarised at 4.48 through 4.51, and then we have a list of pressures from the Directorate as well, which members may have questions or want to seek further clarification on. So in the first instance, I was going to ask Hazel just to pick up the Children's Centres and Connection Service, and then I can pick up the other two.
Okay, thank you. Let's say, so the Children's Centre saving, that's 80,000, which is new this time, and that relates to a contingency budget that we've used to deliver a family learning opportunity called PEEP, which is about helping parents to play with children, and so children learn through play. That's part of the core offer for children's centres. It's about school readiness for children. But what we've actually done, we've had it previously as a standalone officer role. We've now integrated that function across all of children's centres. So removing of the budget is not such an issue because we've actually integrated it into the core offer of staff within children's centres. So we're able to remove that budget. Shall I move on to connections?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So the connections at 4.51, this is an additional saving of 88,000, and that links with the previous saving that was in the October Cabinet report of 50,000, and that equates to a saving of 3.2 posts. But the text at 4.51 also relates to some budget pressures that we've got in terms of overspends in the connection service. So there is an additional reduction from that. So the total reduction is 6.5 posts within the connection service. Now, you may very well want to ask me why we can reduce 6.5 posts, and that's what we've actually done is refresh the strategy for the connection service. And Connections, as you will know, works with our young people in the city to make sure that they are in employment, education and training. And the statutory duties for that connection service originally changed in 2013 and were then enhanced in 2016, so that actually it's a smaller cohort of young people that the connection service is working with. And also some of the previous duties, for example, careers guidance, is now very much with schools. So what we've done through the refresh of the strategy is realign some of those roles and responsibilities through the change in duties. So that's what that budget line refers to.
You're not going to go line by line, are you? Through the budget? You finished? Okay, good. I just really wanted a general overview and then allow councillors to ask any detailed questions.
Okay. Well, I guess in terms of a general overview, I think that was presented very much at the meeting in October in terms of the overall purpose and function of people services and the scale of the savings that we're required to make. And we talked about, I think, aspects of demand and demand management. More than happy to take any further questions on that, Chair, if that would be helpful. I mean, maybe it's worth just drawing members' eyes to the pressures that we have outlined in the paper, which are really focused on a number of issues, many of which will be very familiar because we've done very recent presentations to members on demand management and on our approach to dealing with what's coming in the front door, both in adults and children's. So if I go, would that be helpful if I summarise that briefly? Okay, so in terms of just a brief overview, and I'm looking at page 9 of the report now, 4.52 onwards. The first in relation to commission care costs is really around the care that we purchase and ensuring that we are able to pay the national living wage. So that is very much ensuring that that is built into our base going forward. The second is in relation to the pressures or demographic pressures in adult social care as a result of the ageing population, particularly the over 85s, and the projections really in terms of the customers or potential customers that we will need to support going forward, given the projections around the annual 3% increase in the over 85s. 4.55 is really trying to ensure that some of the essential additional services that we've put in to manage demand within frontline adult social care services as a result of the Improve Better Care Fund, which was temporary money given to councils to deal with increases in demand, but also to strengthen the relationship with health, can be maintained going forward in terms of the base budget, because the Improve Better Care Fund is temporary money, and until we have a fully funded adult social care service moving forward in light of what may come out of the Green Paper. We need to ensure that we can provide those essential frontline services, such as the work we do in hospitals to ensure that we can move people out of hospital when they're ready to be discharged, and our performance there is very good, to make sure that we've got essential posts for the safeguarding work we have to do in adults. And also just to ensure that we've got sufficient capacity in to deal with winter. Moving on to page 10 and 4.56, the apprenticeship manager is a post to ensure that we can maximise the development opportunities for our workforce through the apprenticeship levy scheme, to ensure there's capacity there for us to do that. Then we have, which you'll be very familiar with, pressures as a result of placements for children in care, and you'll know that we've had an increase in numbers of children looked after over the past 12 to 18 months, and that continues. We then have 2 proposed posts as a result of, one, in the first instance, the increasing burden really on councils as a result of the inspection and assessment framework from Ofsted, our regulator, and to ensure that we are as ready and as prepared as we can be for inspection, and similarly because of the, I think, impact of a temporary post that we've put into the performance team to deal with the whole raft of work we have to do around social care, performance and performance indicators and analysis, just to ensure that we can future-proof that going forward as well. Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stanton.
It's just a query really. On the page 29, the removal of base budget for troubled families, it's clear that the grants come to an end, and so that's gone. But to me, it sounds very much like that is preventative and demand management at a time when there are significant pressures on children's services. Is there anything about the, you know, 8 FTE, quite a sizable loss? Is there not some argument for, was it value for money? Is it something that we could, you know, actually invest in and look to fulfil internally, despite the grant going, would still be value for money? Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stanton. In terms of the Troubled Family Programme, there is some very significant evidence of impact locally and regionally and nationally in terms of the programme and achieving and maintaining outcomes and ensuring it's keeping children out of criminal activity, keeping children in school, keeping parents in work. So some very strong evidence in relation to that. I think that what is very evident, though, is because of the scale of the cuts that councils have had to deal with. Although the ambition, I think, was that troubled families would become mainstreamed, essentially that hasn't been possible or viable. So I think the view that the Association of the Directors of Children's Services have taken, as have I, as your DCS, is very much that, regrettably, without continuation of the funding, that particular aspect will have to be decommissioned. The positive, though, 2 things. The first is that the Troubled Families programme in Derby is very much integrated into our early health services. It's not a kind of standalone, discrete team that sits in another part of the council like some councils have arranged it. So we have got some economies of scale there, so there will still be a strong early help offer. And also there is an emerging view really from the DfE, which has happened since we came to Scrutiny in October, in fairness, which is based on quite a lot of lobbying that's been done by the ADCS, and I've drafted a letter for all 9 DCS in the region, for example, to send into the DfE around the continuation of the funding, because I think the DfE have realised that if and when the funding stops, and the programme will be decommissioned across, you know, the vast majority of councils. So that is currently being looked at, but at the moment, until confirmation, it has to be in the budget as a service funding stream that will come to an end in 2 years' time.
You done, Councillor Stanton? Yeah. Councillor Khan, I should have allowed you to come in first, actually. I do apologise.
Chair, thank you very much. Just on the public health reduction in public health grants, what are they? Which area are there going to be reductions in? Thank you.
What we have experienced in public health for certainly the last 3 years, if not 4 years going forward, is a real term reduction in the grant, and it's been something like 3 million over the past 3 or 4 years, and this is a further £500,000 going forward. In terms of how that will be achieved in the city, that will be in a combination of staffing efficiencies. We'll be looking at commissioning, we'll be looking at turnover savings, a whole raft of things to ensure that we can still do the core statutory things that public health need to commission, but at the same time we have to cut our cloth in light of the reductions that we're experiencing in the public health grant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Got a number of questions, pages 8 and 9. So firstly, 4.48, the Children's Centre, the 80,000 cut there. Could you, I presume that that's staffing posts that are being lost, so just to confirm that. You say, Hazel, that it's been incorporated into other posts. So are we able to give the commitment then that the same number of PEEPS programmes will be running and there'll be no reduction in that programme?
Yes, I can confirm that there'll be no loss of posts because the posts have been incorporated into existing staffing, so no one will lose their job through this, and actually PEEP continues. It's a statutory function that we need to provide, so we continue to provide that across the city to our children, yes.
Okay, thank you. 4.50, local area coordination, that budget's been switched to the housing revenue account. Does that mean that only Derby Homes tenants will be able to access that service, or will it be open for everyone still?
It will be open to all because the local area coordinators, through the economies of scale, are working with a range of clients. Some will be Derby Home residents, some won't be.
Thank you. 4.51 connection service, the 88,000 cut there. I'm aware that we've in the past we've actually done really well in terms of NEAT, in terms of knowing where all of our, I mean in some cases 100%, in some schools knowing where those young people are, whether it's employment, training or further education. So it is a bit worrying if you know, if that's going to be put at risk in any way. Careers advice in schools as well, I think, is a bit patchy in some cases, not always consistent. So is there anything you can say in terms of providing reassurance that despite the loss of these posts, that we are going to hopefully be able to keep still keep track of those young people and know as far as possible, as near to 100% as we can, that they're all they've all gone on to do other productive education or training?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it's really important that we maintain our really good performance in this area. And obviously in refreshing the strategy, that's what we've looked at really carefully in terms of what's the structure to deliver the strategy. So we're satisfied on that. I think what we also need to do, you talk about schools' responsibility to deliver careers advice. I think we need to continue to support our schools to undertake that responsibility. So part of the personal advisors' roles within Connections is to continue to work, particularly with our secondary schools, to support that. And we also have our early help offer into schools, which is obviously working with children and young people as well.
Councillor Rawson, I'd have been very surprised if she hadn't given you that reassurance.
Thank you. And finally, just in terms of 4.53 and 4.54, the pressures, are we allowing enough fund, basically, to cover pressures next year. We've had pressures in this year, which I think is maybe more than that. So, you know, are we being a bit too prudent there and underestimating the potential demand that there may be in years going forward?
I think on the adult side, 4.53, 4.54, in terms of the commission care cost, the living wage, that's over the next 2 years. In terms of the profile of care that we'll need to purchase. And the demographic social care pressures costs, so the ageing population, I mean, we're continually reviewing and revising and analysing what's happening in Derby, but you've got here, I think, a pretty well-informed projection of what we're expecting to see. I think it's probably also worth noting that on the adult side, there isn't an overspend, and the adults is projected to balance this year. You know, these calculations kind of take that into account in terms of the kind of level and the prudency around them.
Can I ask the same question of children's pressure then as well?
Yeah. Well, of course, one of the big differences between adults and children's is that on the adult side, there has been an injection of additional funding through the Better Care Fund and the Improved Better Care Fund. And I think it's been reported here previously, without the Improved Better Care Fund, then adults would be overspending. But I think every adult services in council department in the country would be overspending without the IBCF. On the children's side, there hasn't been the same level of additional funding injected, although there has been some additional funding which was announced in the budget last month, which is reflected in the NTFP and has enabled us to present a balanced budget. I mean, the biggest challenge we have on the children's side, as you know, is around the costs of looked after children, in terms of placements, in terms of the sufficiency of placements, because we're having to place too many children in external placements. There's a whole raft of work that we are doing at the moment to really try and appropriately and safely reduce our LAP population, step children down into our internal provision, reconfiguring our children's homes, looking at fostering, social impact bond, all things that have been here through papers en route to Cabinet and been part of wider presentations. So the calculations you've got here are kind of based on, you know, the demand management work, but have to be continually reviewed because you know, the demographics and the care population is quite a dynamic one. And of course, we've also got the added challenge locally in Derby of Laverstock Court and the real challenge around, you know, the Home Office sending adults to Laverstock Court as part of the dispersal process, and then adults then saying that they are young people, and we're assessing those young people, or those adults and as young people, through our age assessment process. That is certainly putting additional pressure in year on children's, and we are doing a whole raft of things in talking to the Home Office. You know, the leader has written to the Home Office, Councillor Williams is speaking to the LGM. There's a whole raft of things doing around that, but you know, when we were sitting here last year, or when we were even developing the budget this year, that wasn't the issue that we've got now.
You done? Okay, thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Andy, bear with me because I'm transferring my notes from one paper to another to try and make it easier, so I may confuse myself, so sorry. Appendix 2 on page 28 of the report, that's where we're going first. My questions are predominantly around adults, if I'm honest, because I'm obviously less familiar with that area, but review of adult care packages. What is an asset-based approach? Does that mean that we are going to be asking people within the community to care for elderly people who may be their neighbour or their family member? Or what does that mean? Because that's quite a lot of money as well to be pegging against a saving for care packages.
An asset-based approach, I suppose, is really very much at the heart of our local area coordination and talking point approach, which is about trying to work with customers, work with people we work with, to look at what support, what advice, what support systems there may be in the community for them. And that might be family, it might be third sector, it might be just the wider network of family and friends. Because we know through trying to intervene early, and trying to build up those connections, that can both reduce the need for statutory adult social care services, and there's a lot of evidence of impact from the local area coordination work, and also even if adults then transition into adult social care services, you can still do some of that preventative work to try and review and mitigate the type of packages going forward. So it's something that we've been doing now for the last 4 or 5 years to good effect. What this is about is also very much reviewing a number of packages that we have in the system to see whether or not there may be different ways of supporting adults, that there may be a chance through doing a review and doing a timely review and then a robust review at looking at all alternatives, and also looking at the way in which we manage our direct payments process. And it's also because there are some direct payments in the system which are unspent, and we need to get much smarter at getting that money back in, it's public money, into the council, and then looking at how we redistribute that as well. So it's a whole combination of different processes that we'll need to go through. It isn't about going into necessarily, package X and taking it all away. It's about doing it through a proper review, proper social work assessment, and also a much more robust process around direct payments that are unspent.
Okay, so just for clarity, Andy, on that then, you can give me an assurance basically, because this is the crux of what I'm getting at. I understand the desire to try and divert the care needs early, through early intervention, to try and find alternatives through local area coordination. I mean, it's a good idea. It's one that I support. But just in terms of this, we're not, by doing this, saying that we are going to rely on other members of the community to care for elderly people in whatever way. Certainly not in terms of like intimate care, things that they might, those quite serious and health needs, etc. We're not requiring people in the community to care for.
No, we're not. And any changes in any package or care plan would be subject to assessment and review. You done? Okay.
The one underneath, Andy, about reprioritising statutory work in terms of dolls. I was always under the impression that a dolls order was demand-led. We don't seek to deprive anyone of their liberty. We would only do it in very exceptional circumstances. So I'm just trying to understand how we would reprioritise our work to avoid doing that when it's demand-led.
Okay, to try and answer your question. So this is very much about, because at the moment we have 2 different ways in which assessments are carried out. We have our own, they're called best interest assessors, our own social workers who are trained up to do those best interest assessments. And that is to really determine whether or not somebody should be deprived of their liberty, and then a doctor has to also have a look at the assessment as well. And then we will also, if we have particularly high numbers, and there are high numbers as there are in every council, we will then sometimes commission agency to come in and undertake those best interest assessments as well. What this proposal is about is saying that we will no longer commission agency, that we will only do them internally, and that we will have to prioritise and ensure that we are doing those that are most needed to be done quickly. Now, to try and provide you with some reassurance, that's what we're doing every day anyway. We are continually reprioritising DOLs so that we are targeting those individuals, often in care homes, where we need to go out and do that assessment quickly. So it's about saying we're not going to commission third parties to do it, so we can save money on the agency, but we have to continue that robust approach to prioritising.
Okay.
Over the page, on page 29, remodelling the universal offer to carers. Can you tell me specifically, as a result of this, what carers will lose?
No, I can't tell you the specifics because we're currently going through a consultation asking a whole range of questions. But what I can tell you is that this is very much about ensuring that as a council we are providing what the Care Act says we have to provide, which is the prevention and advice and information. So the consultation is asking a range of questions around how and who should deliver that. So in terms of what that might look like and what might stop as a result of that, you know, I would just be, you know, filling the air in telling you that, because we need to go through that process properly. But it is very important that we end up with a process that ensures that we're fulfilling our statutory requirements, and that we're really clear about what that minimum offer is going forward.
I've just got to find my next bit now, Chair, because it's in the next appendix, if I can.
Can I just follow up on that last one, just while we have a brief interlude? Given the universal carers package, have we done any sort of risk analysis on, as we continue to reduce our support for carers, is what impact that has on people who can no longer fulfil that role as a carer, and therefore that person then becomes the responsibility, the cared for person becomes the responsibility of the authority for full-time care. Because, I mean, we basically rely heavily on a lot of goodwill and support of members of family who have incredibly difficult lives, and some of the things we're looking to take away, everything that's provided only statutory, is quite poor. And I think there will be people who reach that tipping point, and has that risk analysis happened? Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, I think when we brought this to the meeting in October, this was probably one of the big five that we're consulting on, and certainly do understand the issues you're raising there, and it's certainly something that we have pondered on a lot within Peoples when we were looking at how we were going to achieve savings through a range of proposals. I think what's going to be really important for this one, I mean for all of the proposals, but I think to pick up on your point, is the equality impact assessment is going to be really key here in terms of the impact of the proposed changes. But I suppose it's also just being mindful that we need to ensure through whatever that offer looks like in terms of how we're defining that minimum statutory offer, that we're really clear for whoever's providing that, whether it's the council, whether it's a third party, that we are very clear about what the offer is to carers, and that there's always an opportunity for carers to have that statutory assessment from a social care perspective if they think they've got particular needs as well. So we need to make sure we get that communication right around this.
Just one more. In Appendix 3 on page 36, management review the management structure of the directorate. That's obviously affecting one FTE. Is that going to be in people, in children's or adults, and do we know what level it is? Is it head of service post or another?
This will be in children's, and it will be a tier 3 post, head of service post.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I'm working from page 9. And I've got 3 questions. I think one might be over the page. In terms of connections, and thank you for the explanation because that's really helpful. How much work is happening with, or could be happening with, the private sector to pick up some of the activity and support and the careers guidance in terms of either encouraging that into schools or working directly with connections, both from the point of view of information and also working with individuals? Because I know there's some work like that going on already, but is there scope for more?
Thank you. Yes, there is already some work with a lot of the training providers in the city, but the initiative Opportunity Areas, which we're benefiting from in Derby, is also giving us another range of funding to particularly work with NEET young people in the city. And we're also hoping to be successful in a joint regional funding application that would bring additional income into the city for young people to support them into education, employment and training.
Okay.
Can I ask quickly, when will we be likely to know whether we get that additional funding?
We should know late January.
Helpful. My second point is about 454 and the demographic social care pressures. The clearly this is something that we are working on constantly, and the vision for me and the hope is that we can keep older people healthy and independent for as long as possible, which is obviously the way to reduce our costs. And again, the question is, how much are we engaging with the private sector to be able to help deliver some of those services, so that while people still are active, maybe it's catching the bus, maybe it's standing in a queue, what are we doing to make sure that they retain those abilities for as long as possible? And it can be as silly as, I don't think it is silly, but making sure that people learn how to use a bus when they get their free bus pass, rather than remain using the car, and when they can no longer drive, they then become housebound because they haven't got the capabilities to use the buses. So it's doing that proactive stuff, and it's obviously in the bus company's interest to get people on the buses. So they should be working with us on that, and if they're not, then we need to work out how to engage with them.
Before you answer that, Andy, I just wonder how much of the nanny state do we have in our country? How far do we go down the line to helping people, for instance, get on a bus? I mean, I find it quite incredible that you know, we provide such a lot from our social services, and there seems to be less and less responsibility of other people, families, etc. And now you're asking whether we should provide somebody to show people how to get on a bus. Andy, over to you.
Can I just come back? It's you making sure the private sector is doing that. It's the bus companies that should be working to get people on the buses by giving them the skills.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. If it's on their bottom line, they are a profit-making company. Surely they would do as much as they can to make sure people get on the buses.
Thank you, Chair. Just to try and provide an example, which I think will partly answer Lucy's question. The work that we have done over the past, it's probably 12 to 15 months now, maybe even longer, in working through our Live Well service with Rolls-Royce, which is a good example really of how we've engaged the private sector, and they have engaged very well really in terms of a range of different services that Live Well provide, which they've paid for, and clearly they're one of the biggest employers in the city. And it may be as well, Lucy, but this is probably something that might be useful and relevant to reflect on at the Health and Wellbeing Board at some point in the future in terms of that wider preventative agenda.
Okay.
Chair, and then this comes from the talk earlier about, which Sarah was mentioning, on asset-based approach and the ability of local area coordinators to intervene. There seems to be a bit of a mismatch between the areas of highest old people, which I think are Allestree, Mickleover particularly, and the availability of local area coordinators to intervene. Is that being looked at?
Yes.
Thank you.
Will we get additional local area coordinators everywhere?
Maybe, yes. The issue is being looked at, and I think it's fair to say there's been considerable engagement and appropriate challenge from the Cabinet member.
Did you want to, specific to that, Councillor Stanton?
Just on that point, I don't want it to be perceived that local area coordinators are a role that is exclusively for old people. It's certainly not. And there is an awful lot in this budget, and there is very little for young people, and increasingly less every time we have one of these budgets. So as much as we continue, we know there are demographic pressures, but what we don't want to do is take a vital resource like local area coordinators and then actually just assign them to, based on the age of residents in a particular area. I think that would be really remiss. So just for a point of clarity, sorry, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Have you finished, Councillor Kerr?
That's it.
Councillor Eldred.
Thank you, Chair. Just, Andy, in the public health, so Appendix 2, page 28, that reduction in the controllable public health grant, you talked a little bit about what that might mean in practical, but there's no, first question is, there's no FTE reduction attached to that, although I think you did mention that there could be a reduction in staff, but also, is there more detail anywhere of specifically what that reduction will mean in practical terms? Is it in the consultation? Yes. It is. Okay, so I just need to get that. That's fine. Thank you. Could you, in terms of page 29, the adults, could you just give some clarity around the restructure within the Learning and Development Service to focus on essential learning needs only, and what that means?
Yeah, so this is the Learning and Development team who sit within the Adult Services Department, sit within the Adult Safeguarding Board actually, and they provide a range of training to both our own staff and also to partner organisations, to partner agencies. So this is a FTE reduction of 2.6 posts, and we were doing a complete review really of the focus of their activity going forward, ensuring that it's focusing on the key statutory activity they need to do, focusing on particularly how they train and support our social workers, our approved mental health practitioners, the AMPs, and also looking at how we can, although we do quite well in this in fairness, but how we can maximise the income from third parties, from agencies who purchase the training.
From what I can see, I'm also transferred my notes. So, in relation to the 4 posts moving into the housing revenue account, is that they'll be moved permanently? Is that an agreement that they will permanently be based at the housing revenue account, or how long is that for? This is just a switch of funding. So the actual local area coordination, local area coordinator, location and activity won't change. But but is that a switch on a permanent basis? Yes. So they will permanently come from the HRA? Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. I thought she was looking through her notes ready for the next bit. Okay, I've got no more questions. Anybody? We're all happy with that? Okay, I think we can now move over to communities in place. Christine, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So just a very broad summary in relation to the types of savings that we've put forward from communities in place. Essentially, we have broadly looked for where we can find efficiencies because we have either changed the way we do things or regulations have changed. We've had some opportunities where we can look to increase income to cover particular activities. We've also got a group of savings that are around trying to work more closely with local communities, looking for sponsorship and income on the delivery of some of our services so we can reduce the council's costs. There's a large saving associated with reviewing and increasing our parking charges, and also proposals to look at traffic management arrangements in locations where we feel it will help local areas, businesses, and obviously the report talks about district centres, but we would only be doing that if we really felt there was a benefit to those local areas. There's also a number of savings that are related to where we recover capital fees from schemes that we work on and reviewing to make sure we are charging the appropriate amounts. And there's also been a range of fees and charges increases that have been approved on services such as leisure and culture, bereavement services. So they are the main sort of broad areas that we've got here. There aren't, I suppose, significant, what you would call some of the traditional cuts in service. We've tried to look at where we can work with the services that we're delivering to generate more income, or we're genuinely being more efficient. Just in terms of pressures, there are a number of areas where we are currently forecasting that our income levels are not as we would like them to be, and we feel that that must be reflected in the pressures. There are some previously agreed improvements in services that have been to Cabinet throughout the year, And also we've incorporated in this section costs associated with the proposed new swimming pool, the assembly rooms, operational costs, and the introduction of the free garden waste collection service. I think that's an overall summary. Chair, happy to take questions.
That's brilliant, Christine. Thank you. Have we got any questions? Councillor Khan.
Yeah. Just want to ask about that free garden waste collection service. How have you come to this figure, and is it all in the city?
I won't have all of the figures to hand, I'm afraid. There was the detailed cabinet paper, but broadly, this is a service that will be offered across the city, but we think that there are around 80,000 households that will take it up. And the costs are around, obviously, the operational costs of additional trucks, additional drivers and collectors, but also the savings that we will make from diverting the waste from going into, that's currently going into black bin, which costs more to dispose of than disposing of at recycling sites.
Just follow.
Yes.
You know, some part of the ward or the city previously, they've just got black bins. And how is that going to work out?
So our current assessment is that in many of those areas, there are areas where actually there aren't houses with significant sized gardens, and therefore those residents may not want to have garden recycling, and they, in a sense, they can carry on putting that waste in the black bin if that's what they're doing. And our analysis hasn't incorporated making that level of saving. But if there are areas and residents that do want brown bins, then we will be looking to deliver that service. It might be that it's not a regular truck that is going around there. It might be that we have to look at some different ways of picking up that waste. But obviously we will look at that when we come to do the detailed implementation and we start to hear from residents as to who would like to have the brown bin.
Okay, Councillor Eldred.
Chair, just on page 37, in the alternative funding to be sought, what resource do we have in place in order to secure that funding? Because obviously it doesn't, you need somebody or a team to work on securing that funding, and has that been factored into the saving? I suppose the ditto for the next one in terms of park grounds maintenance.
So essentially, on the funding for floral features, 105,000 is broadly the figure within the service, and we will be looking over the coming year at how we can increase the number of sponsorship opportunities that there are for businesses. So there are still some of our kind of roundabouts and key areas where we would have floral features where we don't incorporate them within our sponsorship list of assets. So we think there's an opportunity to raise funding there. But we also know from some of our friends of groups that they are, and other organisations, that they're keen to donate flowers. So that would save us funding in terms of purchasing flowers, plants. So I think it's about how we can work with the community to overall reduce those costs. It may be, if there are significant areas where communities are looking to take over doing maintenance and planting out beds, that there may be some staffing reductions. But I think I'm not envisaging that to be a significant amount. I think we're looking more for how we can generate additional income from sponsorship to cover these this proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. My question, though, specifically was, in order to generate sponsorship or community engagement, you need to actually have a resource to do that. It doesn't come from nothing. So what is the resource that we have in order to generate that sponsorship, and is that factored in as a pressure, essentially?
Sorry. So within the communications service at the moment, we have resources that manage our sponsorship opportunities across the city. And so we would be looking to work with that team to increase the number of assets that they're selling. So we don't see that as a significant increase in resources. And also, I think through the expansion of the neighbourhood working, that's part of another opportunity, there will be a way for us to engage across the service more in a more targeted way with some of the communities. And we would be looking to the current Friends of Parks groups also to expand that work. So I don't think we see this as a significant additional resource that's required to look at this, but obviously it will be targeting particular existing resources to prioritise this area of work.
Thank you. So that leads me to the, and I may be being daft, Christine. So on to page 40, we've got a savings proposal under environmental protection and neighbourhood working. Right, that's not a pressure, is it? But the description is an extended approach to neighbourhood working and an increase in the number of community protection officers. So can you just explain how we generate a saving by increasing the team?
So the proposal here is that we will look to have community protection officers that will not only be able to do enforcement around environmental crime issues where they're currently targeted at the moment, but they will also have the powers to do other areas of enforcement, including things like parking enforcement. Now, we know that in a number of areas across the city, there are parking issues that we don't currently have the resources to deal with within our own services. And so we've done an analysis that looks at actually if we were to try to make sure we can improve our parking and other enforcement, that essentially the increased number of officers could be funded from income that would come through enforcement across the city.
So essentially you're looking at generating income from parking tickets in order to fund an increase in that team.
It won't just be from parking, but from enforcement activity, and that is on the basis that we know that there are, you know, a number of issues that are raised through neighbourhoods that we don't have the resources to deal with, but actually we could tackle those through taking enforcement action. And so we've done an analysis. There's obviously some built-in funding within the service from those CPOs that we already have. So we've reviewed the overall budget, and this is our estimate as to where actually there will be a surplus.
Okay, so what's the proposal, how many CPOs are we proposing to extend to? How many? We're 10 at the moment, is that right?
I think we might have 9, so I think we have a supervisor and 8 CPOs, and we also have some funding for administrative support. So this would look to extend the number of CPOs to 22. So we would have broadly 1 CPO for each of the wards, although they wouldn't be just dedicated to that area. We would look at a prioritisation system, but also we obviously need supervisors and managers within that. So that's where we get to 22. But we are working up in detail those proposals, so that number may well change when we get to the detail.
And so what is then the projected income that we're expected to generate?
I haven't got the total figures to hand. We can provide them as the basis behind this, but I don't have the income and costs. What I've got is the net difference.
Can you tell us how much they get paid? That would give us an indication.
I think the figure is around 26,000, including the on costs.
Well, there's a starting figure. I'm assuming they're going to have to pay for their own salary. More questions?
Oh, yes, I can. Okay, so sorry, not page 40. Can you just give me a bit more detail on the amendments to winter service treatment times, what that means? please?
Yeah, so over the last few years, we've invested in additional technology that helps us to basically look at when is the best time to go out and start to grit, and also what level of treatment that we need to put down on the roads. And so this is about really trying to identify that efficiency. But if we can minimise the treatment times, because we're targeting exactly when we go out, that means we can also reduce the amount of resource that we need to have at any one time from officers. So that's where the standby payments come in.
And the last one, the under planning, the review of the conservation and heritage function, what's that likely to include?
So that's the 41,000 is associated with a post, and we need to look at how we can reduce our input into conservation and heritage functions within the council. So that's a proposal. The post holder as leaving, so we've got a vacancy, and so we are going to see whether we can review and potentially reduce the amount of work in that area to make that saving.
Okay, Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Page 11, 4.64, going back to the grounds maintenance cuts. I think it's very laudable and right that we should look to involve the community as much as possible, but it is very difficult to do, as we know. It's been tried before, and it varies in terms of the amount of success it brings. Are we saying then that if that's not successful, then the floral displays and the grass cutting frequency and so on will be cut in order to meet this budget target?
That's not what we're saying at this stage. I think the reason why these proposals are in year 2 and 3 of the MTFP is to give us the next 12 months to really establish what opportunities we can get in order to move that forward. And then we would be reviewing whether we felt that future savings were achievable by further sponsorship, or actually then whether there is a decision about whether the funding is removed for those if we can't generate it. But that's why we've put it into the year 2 and 3, just to give us that opportunity to really have another go at it.
Okay, thank you. I'll roll 2 into 1 if I can here. For 4.65 parking services, just a quick confirmation really that savings basically increased income from car park charges. And then 4.66 network management, I'm not quite clear as to what exactly that is, so you could perhaps just explain a bit more about that one.
So yes, you're right. The parking services is about increasing in parking charges and potentially introducing new parking charges in different areas. The vast majority of it, 300,000, is estimated to be the increase in income from the recent increase in parking charges that was approved by the Cabinet member a few weeks ago. And the network management 80,000 is linked to the permitting that we have for the work that statutory undertakers carry out, and we feel that when we've reduced the resource that's gone in from highway inspectors over recent years, and we believe that utility companies are now not acting as they should be in terms of implementing the permits that they get for working in the highway. And if we can put in some resource to essentially improve their activity, it's an enforcement resource, so they get fined if they overstay in the highway when they're doing work. So this is saying that we think at least for a couple of years we should be looking to target that area, and we believe that 80,000 would be the income that we would, the net income that we would make from that.
Before you carry on there, can I just add an extra question to that? Do you think it might be counterproductive to increase parking charges? Because people tend to go parking somewhere because they want to go shop, they want to add to the economy, and do you think that might deter people from doing that, and so therefore be a counterproductive measurement?
I think we haven't increased parking charges since 2014, and so when we look at and when we review the parking charges, we look at what other parking operators are charging within the city and also within our neighbouring areas, and I think we felt that it was appropriate for us to add in a charge. Most of the areas we are charging in, it's because we have an oversubscription of people that want to park in those areas.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. 4.68 economic partnerships budget. A number of organisations mentioned there, key cities, etc., which I can understand are costs and outgoings. But the Marketing Derby grant, that organisation through its activities in terms of attracting and bringing new employers and jobs into the city actually has a significant impact in terms of bringing business rates in, and I think it is possible to identify specific situations where a particular organisation wouldn't be in Derby without the input of Marketing Derby. So it does seem in some ways rather counterproductive reducing the grant. They're going to survive, but they're increasingly focusing their attention on the county and moving into Burton as well, I think. So that's a bit of a concern, really. When it is an invest to save in many ways, because we're likely to recoup any investment that we make many times over by boosting up the business rates for what is a relatively small amount of money that we're talking about here. I think it's 40,000. So has that sort of been taken into account in terms of the return that's brought in to the council's coffers through other means?
I think we have considered that. It is a difficult situation, but I think there are a number of areas, even within the council, where we have had to take reductions in staffing and take other savings, even when we know that actually that might have a longer term impact. And I think this is just really in a difficult budget situation. I think we just felt that it was an appropriate level. It's not something that I think members would particularly want to do, but Marketing Derby, it has been successful in raising significant amounts of income from other public sector bids that they do, obviously the bondholder support and working within Derbyshire. The City Council will still be the biggest single funder, as I understand it, and I think we would keep it under review, but I think in the current climate it just felt like we needed to look to take a cut from Marketing Derby.
Okay, Councillor Ross and Councillor Poulter would like to answer part of that question as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just for your information, really, a bit further, more than Christine's been able to say so far, is that Marketing Derby are a fantastic organisation. They do great work for the city. Yes, they bring in many business rates for the city, but that's their job. They are an inward investment company for the city. Derby City Council has been the parent sponsor, and they set up. We set up Marketing Derby from the very beginning with significantly larger grant than it is now. It's not been reduced for a number of years, where grants to all sorts of organisations across the city have had to be reduced. We are still by far and away the biggest sponsor of Marketing Derby. They're branching out into Derbyshire and Burton, as has been mentioned, so their resources are potentially being strapped from that. But as I say, we are still far and away the biggest investor. They now have over 200 bondholder companies who all also contribute towards their figures, and their income is massively more than it used to be when it first set up, to the point that I think initially we were providing around 60% of their funding. That with this reduction will be around 15%, which gives you an indication of how much money they are receiving from bondholders. It's not ideal, but I'm afraid Marketing Derby can't be immune to the sort of savings that other organisations have had to be made on them when their income from other sources has risen so significantly. We have discussed this with them, we will continue to work with them, and we will continue to massively, between us, represent the best for the city.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Okay, thank you. One final question. 4.73, that's talking about leisure income. It's aimed to generate additional income in leisure for 1920. So we've got additional income targets. At the same time, at 4.74, as we're saying that attendance and usage of Queen's is actually falling because of the age of the building and the offer that competition from private sector and the rest of it. So how does that balance out that we're expecting additional income in leisure and from Queen's when the recent history has suggested that it's been going in the opposite direction?
So the service has looked at a number of the activities that we put on, and this is a leisure income target across the whole of leisure. So it includes also activities that we might be putting on at the arena with new events, and also other areas, not just at Queen's. So I think, you are right, we rightly recognise a pressure within Queen's around the income that we are struggling to make, but also we still believe that there is a further market around some of the Learn to Swim and some of the holiday offers that we can make, where we believe that we can make additional income. So we could have simply not put in the pressure or recognised the additional activity by netting them off, but I think we just wanted to be open and transparent about the way forward. And as I say, not all of that leisure income is certainly about Queen's, it is about other activities across the service.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of the questions I had have already been asked, but on page 37 of the report, highways, maintenance and parks, highways, parks inspectors, creation of a hybrid highway inspector, park ranger and arboricultural inspector. Does that mean one person's going to be doing 3 jobs?
Yes.
It hopefully means a number of people will have the skills to do a number of jobs. But I think we believe that there's an opportunity because to have some efficiencies within those services, because we have numbers of inspectors going to similar areas of the city, looking at those 3 different areas, and we just think that there's probably is some efficiency that we can make. As I say, the saving is in year 3 on the basis that we need to do a proper review of those activities and just see where the benefits may be.
Okay.
What is it on this blooming document? I don't know. Page 40? Yes. The bottom of page 40. Savings generated through transformational work. Risk of overspend remains if there is severe winter. What's that mean?
So what that means is that we have a budget for our winter maintenance gritting activities, and over the last 5 to 6 years we haven't used all of that budget. So we've reviewed that expenditure, and as I alluded to earlier about the different technologies that we've brought in to try to help to minimise the use of the salt and the number of times that we are gritting, we have we just haven't used the amount that's in the budget. So I think in these difficult budget times, what we're saying is we've reviewed this. We think that we could have less in the budget, but we'd have to recognise that if there was a severe winter, then when we might have a pressure, and then we would have to make another saving in year somewhere else. But generally, it's considered that this is an appropriate saving to take.
So what's the rest of the grit budget?
I'm afraid I don't know. I'll have to get back to you, sorry.
Okay. Jack says you need to just grit and bear it. Sorry, I know. I didn't say that. I just thought I had to subject everybody else to it because I heard it, and I just like, no, that's not on.
It was the nitty-gritty of the budget, we ignored that one.
Yeah. On page 41, housing, strategic housing efficiencies, review of charge-out rates and closer working alongside Derby Homes. What's the charge-out rates, and what's the deal with strategic housing with that?
So there's two elements within one here. So we the charge-out rate is to do with the disabled facilities grant. So we have capital grant that we use to do work in to adapt disabled people's homes. The staffing that work on those projects charge their time against the capital. That's how it's funded. And when we've done a review of the way the charge-out rates are done, they aren't applying the normal charge-out rate that we charge across on other capital projects. So that there's a sum of money within that 200 that means that we can essentially have additional income into the revenue by charging the right amount of funding against the capital for the staff that are working against that capital project. Working with Derby Homes, we have looked at the fees and the service charges around the operation of Milestone House and a couple of the mobile sites that Derby Homes work with us on. So again, it's about reviewing where the charges sit and what efficiencies we can bring to the general fund through the work we're doing with Derby Homes.
Thank you. Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. I guess firstly, just to echo what Martin says, and thanks for Chris Poulter said about Marketing Derby. I think they do a great job, and it's always quite sad to see people have to go and peddle their wares in Burton for future commercial opportunities. I want to just touch on the sponsorship and community involvement. Forgive me, but this is a bit, deja vu. We have heard of this before. And what I'm interested in is what additional savings we think we can do, or what haven't we explored previously? Because this has been a savings ongoing, and whether, so I guess what I'm asking is what our utilisation of the sponsorship of existing opportunities, is there 100%, and we have a list of sponsors who are waiting for opportunities, in which case this is very much an identifiable savings, or are we looking to actually this is more speculative than that. And I guess the second part of that is the community element of that. So within my own ward, we have some very, very good community involvement in whether it's Five Lamps or FODOS, doing great work. But they're almost, there isn't a limitless capacity there. And also it involves, they're often coming cap in hand. They used to come to the board for money to allow them to do, a little bit of money goes a long way. But I think at some point when the onus goes entirely to them as self-funded, these things are likely to fall down there. So are we just asking a little bit too much? So how realistic is that? Thank you.
I think we feel it is realistic, but there is a piece of work to do to look at the list of assets that we currently have available for sponsorship. I think there is a feeling that there are more assets that could be sponsored that we haven't yet got on that list, and there are also local businesses from those areas that actually would be keen to do that sponsorship. But again, that's why this saving is in years 2 and 3, because we recognise that there's a lot of work to do to generate that additional interest. And, you know, if that doesn't come to fruition in the next 12 months, then we'll have to review where we are. But I think we feel that there is an opportunity to look at this and to have another go at it, to try to see whether we can just target some more sponsorship.
And in terms of the current sort of take-up of that, we're at 100%?
I'm not sure it's 100%, but we are at high levels of income. Certainly the services meeting their income targets in relation to the sponsorship activities they've got.
Okay, thank you. Chair, can I just carry on? I just want to, Sarah touched on it, and it is the creation of the hybrid highway inspector, well, the unicorn role that is doing the park ranger and the ARB inspector role. Particularly, highway inspector and arboriculturist, these are two quite, correct me if I'm wrong, quite highly qualified roles in order to play that consultative role of, you know, TPOs and everything like that, and be able to then switch and be able to do something quite different in terms of inspecting highways, both of which in this city are probably not in the best state due to, you know, years and years of cuts. Do we think that we can produce these unicorns? Do they exist? Is there people wanting to do this? And what do we need to put in additional support to allow them to reach the required sort of development needs, or whether they need certification or whatever that might be? I'm not sure whether I've misunderstood of how qualified they need to be to do this.
So I'm sure that we would envisage that there would be additional training for people, but this isn't to say that there won't be specialist roles for highways inspectors, arboriculturists and park rangers. What we're looking at is some of the generalist work that happens. And so, for example, park rangers, actually quite a lot of the activity of park rangers is inspecting recreational areas, in play areas that are actually right adjacent to highway. So it's about trying to see whether we can just be more efficient about the general inspections that we're doing in our public areas, rather than specifically saying everyone will be doing everything. That's not what this is about. It's about trying to be more generalist. And we did a similar sort of thing within environmental health over the last few years, where we had specialists in particular areas. We now have people that are more generic and more generic people, but then a couple of specialists. And so I think we're trying to see whether that model can work within this area.
I thought you'd have been in favour of hybrid technology, Councillor Stanton.
Why? Well, anyway, moving on. Lastly, from me is the conservation piece. As a dedicated member of CAC, I do find it quite surprising that we're cutting this post or not replacing it. Conservation in the city is vitally important, and already we're struggling, I think, through a lack of enforcement of conservation issues, and have been for some time. I was under the impression that we'd got an enforcement officer in, or when you may be able to clarify that, because we either have to change one or two things. Either we have to properly fund it and support it, and so it isn't just a case of ask for planning and we'll say no, or don't ask for planning and we'll never come after you, and take conservation absolutely seriously, or we have to change the expectations of residents, businesses and everyone else in those areas, because it leads to a huge amount of frustration when people see conservation violations or people not adhering to these things, and basically leads to a steady degradation of the conservation nature of these areas, and obviously, and particularly in terms of the work done by the Conservation Area Advisory Committee. Other than one or two councillors, the rest of whom are volunteers and give a great deal of time and expertise to do so, you know, it's a bit sad if basically we're not matching that with officer support to ensure that their expertise and their advice is being taken on board. And I'm saying that as one of the few people on that committee who isn't a signed-up member of the Tory party.
Was there a question in there?
Why are we cutting it? Yeah.
I think I think there is an opportunity because the post holder is leaving, and we should always review whether we should look to take savings. But I think also we have done some benchmarking across other authorities, and having one conservation officer is not an unusual place to be. So I think we just felt that we needed to take the opportunity to review and to have some conversations about this particular area. But I don't underestimate the level of work. It's one of those areas where, you know, it could expand to however many people that we had working on it. But there is a review going on to look at what the impact of this will be in some more detail, and obviously that's going on during this consultation period as well.
Just want to point out we don't have one conservation officer. We have one person doing a part-time job. It's not a full post. And nobody should run away with the idea that we had two, one's gone, therefore we're left with one. The arithmetic doesn't add up quite like that.
Are you done, Councillor Stanton?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Can I start back with grounds maintenance? I'm on page 11. And really support the sort of comments that have already been made in terms of getting further people involved from the public. And I think there is an appetite for people to get more involved, but not necessarily on the day-to-day sort of planting things out in gardens side of things. But I think there's, because of the lack of investment in things like play areas, I think there's actually an appetite for people to do some bidding and to be getting grants in to be able to improve our parks. Now, at the moment, we have the bidding process. We've got our friends at Little Over Parks are wonderful arm's length organisations who can be doing some of that bidding from Big Lottery and the like. At the moment, we don't seem to have a resource in-house to support the bidding process, and people are being encouraged to go and talk to Derby Community Action. But if we're actually going to achieve that, and we could be talking here not about the, you know, a dipping platform for a pond for £4,000, but we could be talking about significant five-figure bids for play areas. We actually do need to put a bit of resource in to achieve that. And I don't know whether we can refigure. You mentioned that there were a comms team, but I don't know if the comms team have the expertise to be able to help with doing bids. But I think there is scope there. And obviously, if we're then managing a project, we should be putting in the officer time for doing the project management on behalf of the Friends of Parks. And I think that is something that we actively need to be looking at, because we have those, it would inspire, I think, some of the people involved with Friends of Parks as well if they were doing that. So it's a wish list, I'm sorry, but it might be a reorganisation and an invest to save, which is part of the thinking in that section. In the network management, I think this is quite interesting, because probably other members get people phoning them up and saying, why is my road closed? Someone's doing some work on my road and it's been happening there for the last 3 days.
Councillor Kerr, are you scrutinising the budget, or are you doing your full council speech? Because you can say all these things at full council and you'll get full 5 minutes.
I'm looking at the budget and how we're going to be looking at it. And this is 4.66 on network management.
Yeah, I know where you are in the papers. What I'm saying is you seem to be doing a full council speech rather than a scrutiny. Let's scrutinise the officers about why they've got the figures in there.
And here we're saying we're not sure how we're going to manage to stretch our inspector team further. I think we have the eyes and the ears out there who are our residents, and it's how we get them to engage and provide the pictures from someone's smartphone or the information. And people have recently received, these last week or so, we've had lists of road closures. And if that information is available online, people can then check whether or not their road is supposed to be closed for 2 days or 4 days and report back if it's closed for too long. And I don't know if we can get that sort of IT working so that the eyes and the ears are out there. And that might change the way in which we want to invest to be able to achieve this saving. Over the page, we've talked about neighbourhood management, and I just want to say thank you, because I think that's explained much better what's going on there. On page 14, I want to come back to this issue of planning and link it to the land drainage on page 12, because both the land drainage resource and the heritage resource, and also the resource that we've lost on wildlife and ecology, which went several years ago. They are all really important when we're talking about a planning application and making sure that we're getting the best we can. So I'm really concerned about the land drainage, and we're talking now about insourcing, which sounds to me like consultants. Why aren't we keeping the staff we've got and outsourcing? Because if we lose the detailed knowledge about about how Derby works in terms of drainage, it's going to be much harder to replace. So that's that bit. And finally, the bereavement services on 492, page 15. What's actually happening here, please? I don't know of opening of a new competitive facility. Is that no longer a public sector?
A question.
Sorry. Bereavement services pressure. So there's a new crematorium that's opened just outside of Derby, in South Derbyshire, and so it's a private operation, and they're essentially taking our business.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Ashburner.
A couple of brief points. You were following on from the comments about winter gritting. Leicester Highways have invested in winter time street by street met forecast, and that's saved them quite a lot of money on gritting, both in terms of material and in terms of time. Secondly, the Derbyshire Environmental Trust hands out £1 million a year, so supporting bid writing might well be help our people get that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Khan.
I just want to comment about these, I think, Councillor Ashburn and Councillor is it Carr? Yeah, mentioning about these, about this funding for these small groups and all that. These are groups that just manage a small group in the park and just maintain the park. These funding processes are not that easy. You need extra staff, then the funding has to be very professionally managed. And the lottery process is very difficult, it's not easy. So I don't know where you're coming from all this, that these groups need to apply for these big funds and all that. They're only there for a small amount of fund that they can manage. It's maybe hundreds or £1,000 or something. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Right, we'll now move on to the capital budget. Don, do you want to just give an overview?
Yes, Chair, the indicative capital programme set out from paragraph 4.95 on page 16, and what it shows there is the programme over the next 3 years, totalling £284 million. The body of the report contains some information on where the funding is coming from, but there is a list at Appendix 5 of where the extended and schemes are. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody got any questions? We'll take the whole of the capital budget rather than doing just different directorates. Any questions on the capital? Councillor Russell.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just ask about the Disabled Facilities Grant, which is in this report for 21-22? Can I just ask if that's an increase or decrease from the previous year in terms of the expenditure planned?
It's page 46. It's about a third of the way down.
Yeah, that's 21-22. That's 3 years on. Interestingly, we've just had confirmation this week of some additional income from the financial settlement for local authorities, that there's going to be additional funding put into Disabled Facilities Grant. We've been allocated around about 250,000. for the current financial year, so that's good. The question is regarding what the additional 1.915 in 21-22. Is that what you're asking?
No, I just asked whether it was an increase or decrease on the previous year's expenditure, because it's obviously not in this budget. I don't know if you know that, Don.
I don't have it at hand, Chair, but I can get back to you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Over the page on 47, public transport, cleaner taxis. What's that for? What's it mean?
Third item down, page 47.
Yes, Chair, this is linked to a grant that we've been given through from DEFRA to work to see whether we can move to a cleaner taxi fleet. So there's a number of initiatives. I've not got all the details to hand, but it's a grant that's been allocated in line with the work that we're doing on air quality to do the improvements. And it is looking at things like whether we have additional infrastructure to help to promote electric vehicle taxis. But I can get you some more details on the breakdown of that.
Okay. Any more questions? Councillor Eldratt.
Going on page 17, just in terms of where the capital programme is being funded from, if you could just just the different types of borrowing. So if you could just explain the service finance borrowing, the service finance, investor save. Could you just explain what that means for me, Don, please?
Hi, do you want to go through what the funding requirements are, for instance, capital receipts? Is that, you want to go through each one?
No, I don't need to go through that. It's just, I understand those. It's those two.
Which ones? Sorry.
Service finance borrowing and service financed investor save borrowing. What's the difference in terms of, there's three different types of borrowing you mentioned. What's the difference between them?
There is a typo there. That should say prudential borrowing.
Yeah.
Prudential borrowing. It should say prudential borrowing, shouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah. What about the other? No. Just what's the difference between that and the other two?
Yeah. Of service finance borrowing, it's where the service are borrowing for a scheme.
Yeah.
And prudential borrowing is where we corporately borrow.
And what about the investor save?
The investor save is where we give the funding, but it will make a saving ultimately. Self-financing.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks. So this, the 59.123 over that 3-year period.
Yeah.
Is that then the total borrowing that's anticipated over that period? That's not the new stuff, that's the total, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the total over the 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? Councillor Kerr.
I'm on the appendix on 46. I just wondered if you could, we knew in terms of schools and the 14 million that's identified here, whether we knew what that is actually going to be and where it's going to be. And have I missed something about St Clair's Special School and its redevelopment and what that £3.5, nearly £4 million is going to be for?
In terms of the St Clair Special School, that's in relation to the SEND strategy that was agreed at Cabinet in October in terms of the redevelopment of St Clair's to make it change its age range on St Clair Special School. So that's in relation to that.
That's anticipated in consultation going through?
Yes, yes. Sorry, what was the other question in relation to schools? That there will be a detailed programme drawn up for 2021 onwards in relation to that, but it will be around school capacity. I don't have the details of the plans for 2021, but I can.
it's additional classrooms or whether it's
it will be, it's basic need, so it will have to be in relation to additional classrooms or increasing the PANs of schools that we've got or that we're already in negotiation with, but it will be about increasing numbers, and that's what the basic need allocation is.
Okay, are you finished, Councillor Kerr? Yeah, good. Councillor Stanton.
Yeah, I'm probably just missing here. So I'm on page 17. I'm looking at the capital receipts, and I'm just wondering where this is reflected in this. So you might be able to help me. We've recently, the decision was made to move 13 million from the capital receipts that was earmarked for the Moorways project to the old assembly rooms. Where is that reflected in here? And does moving that money from capital receipts to fund the old assembly rooms basically just mean that we'll just have to borrow more money for the new Moorways project? Therefore, it's borrowing whether it's here or whether it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. What we're looking at here is the forward funding and the forecast. These are forecasts for capital receipts. The report that went to Cabinet last time was capital receipts that we've already received. So it's cash. So we've already got that cash from the cattle market and other capital receipts. So these are based on our property rationalisation programme, sale of assets, sale of land. These are our forecasted capital receipts over the next 3 years, so 24 million in total. The question linked to how might we fund a new swimming pool. As things stand, there is £20 million worth of borrowing aligned to that scheme. The capital receipts has been moved, so if the council is minded to move forward with a swimming pool project, the funding of that would have to be sourced other than from capital receipts that were already allocated.
So just to follow up, that could be from future capital receipts, but we may need to wait to rationalise some of those 24 million, or would have to be funded by borrowing.
Correct.
Are you done, Councillor Stanton? Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. Looking at Appendix 5 on page 46. First of all, the Derby Cathedral School, there's 1 million in there for 2 years. If you could just perhaps explain what that is. I was aware that it was either a free school or an academy, I think. So are we passporting that funding through, or are we making a contribution to that? And secondly, about 6 up from the bottom, homes for older people, 1 million this coming financial year, 1.75 million the following year. If you could just explain what that is, please, homes for older people.
Contribution to Derby Cathedral School, yes, yes, and the homes for older people. That will be the sale of the. No, it's the investment. Oh, the investment. I can't see where that is. Sorry.
It's on page 46. It's about 2/3 of the way down.
Yeah, I've got that one. That's
Have you got that?
That's in relation to our property services. Can I get back to Councillor Rawson on that one, please, with the detail?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eldratt.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like I should know the answer to this, but on page 17, again, you're looking at the funding for the capital programme, and the revenue. Having said I understood it, why are we spending that? Where does that 13.515 million of revenue funding? Why are we spending that amount of revenue funding on capital programme? Am I being daft?
Is this at the bottom of the page?
It's in the middle. So as you go in the middle, so It's where it says funded by. So we've got the funding requirement and then how it's going to be funded. And you've got capital receipts is the first line, and then under that you've got revenue funding.
Just to answer that, we have things like revenue contributions to capital, so I can get you the detail and send it you, but there are different reasons that we use a revenue contribution to the capital programme.
Is that, it seems like a lot, is that a normal amount? Is that kind of, because it seems to be a lot in one year?
It does look to be a lot in the first year, but it could be because of slippage, and I can get that detail to you.
Could be because of slippage.
Okay, you got any more questions? Very good. Okay, this is now about the 8th or 9th year where we've had real reductions in the council budget. That alone shows you how difficult it is to find savings or changes to budget spending. Pressures also here are to be factored in, although we have to accept that these are the best guesstimates and maybe much less or maybe much more. What we can say is that officers and the budget holders have worked very hard to get to this stage. So on behalf of the committee and all councillors, I thank them for all their hard work. You can clap if you wish, you know, spontaneous. At this stage, I know. Thank you, Councillor Wood. I am used to it, obviously. At this stage, if you have any recommendations that you want to put forward to Cabinet, please say now. I was conscious of things that Councillor Kerr said, which seemed to be more like we want to swap funding from one here to the other. If you've got anything that you wish to recommend, then please say it now and we can have a vote on it. Has anybody got any recommendations? Councillor Kerr.
I think for me, my biggest concern is the planning implications for not being able to have. Oh, okay. No, but she can recommend it, and then one of maybe Councillor Ashburn might suggest that's a recommendation. Okay, I think it's ensuring that we've got the right level of expertise for making planning decisions. So to review the level of in-house expertise in terms of the urban design elements, including our historic buildings.
I'm not really sure that that's... you've got to sort of specify where you want the funding changed. So if you think there should be more spending, for instance, in planning than there is in... and move it from social services to planning, then by all means suggest that, and then we can send that to Cabinet for them to consider. But to give a generic, we want to do more here, without actually giving anything specific, then it's going to be very, very difficult, because it's you know, we all want more money for the council, we want to spend more money everywhere, but we have the money that we have, and there is the budget details. If you've got any recommendations that you want to put to the Cabinet, please say them now. Okay, can I just then say thank you for coming to the meeting, thank you for the officers for presenting, and very, very nice and welcome to see the Cabinet members attend. Really pleased, and thank you very much.